Hi friends, this is Ray Lutz, and I'm an engineer. I've been doing election integrity type of work since about 2005. And today I'm here to present to you the letter that was sent to the Department of Justice, headed up, as you know, by Merrick Garland. And just want to go over this letter because I think it really does a pretty good job of summarizing the issues. And of course, this is regarding the 2024 election. Now, a lot of people have been wondering if this election was done properly and if the results are right. Those questions are good questions to ask. That doesn't mean that you're automatically an election denier or someone that you should, a conspiracy theorist or something. But it is reasonable to have theories about what actually happened when we actually don't know. And so you come up with an idea of what happened to explain the results. This doesn't necessarily involve a conspiracy. It could just be some kind of machine failure or something else as to what the results were, but it's a theory nonetheless. So let's go through this letter. I apologize if this video is not one of the best you've ever seen on YouTube, but I think it still will get to the point of what we need to do. So this letter was sent a while back on November 25th now, and sent by certified mail as well. And so essentially the problem is with our system of elections is that we really don't have anyone providing really good oversight to these elections, and it's almost impossible to come up with that. The reason is because anyone in government who is now elected and in control likes the outcome, and they don't want it questioned. And so it's very hard for them to, they're not going to question their own outcome. And if you have an organization like the Department of Justice, it may become corrupted and loyal to the current administration, and it would not question the results either or do a good job of oversight. Essentially, it would just try to cover up anything that may be there. But this time, in this season, we had some unusual things that happened before the election. I can highlight here, and maybe I can even make this a little bigger, in that we are looking to request that the Department of Justice instigate an investigation into the election. And why? Well, we did have a whole bunch of bomb threats. We had voter intimidation. We had voting system theft before the election. And we had, as a result of those thefts and the information that was revealed, backdoors in the equipment that can be used to maliciously alter the results. And there were other things too. There were also rewards given away, $1 million prizes and other things. Now, we need, before we get into this, let's just very, very briefly think about the different actions. I'm not going to go through it in detail. We'll probably make another video about it. But you have way before the election rigging that goes on. And that's, for example, setting up what districts there are and other, let's see if this works. Yeah. So what districts you have involved in the election, the gerrymandering that goes on, who can vote, who's on the voter rolls, whether they're purged or not, etc. So all before the election, and the election laws that are involved. So all that happens long before the election. And I got to say, the Republicans are really, really good at this phase. And in the last election period, they had many, many laws that were considered, and a lot of them passed to make changes in this respect. Reduce the number of drop boxes, reduce the days, reduce if you can vote by mail, all these other things. Then there is the campaigning period. And the campaign, well, you first have who's running for office and their platforms and what kind of people they are. That is almost never discussed, what their priorities and platforms are. But then you have an information warfare period where there's all kinds of things said by each other and lies go both ways. This is when you also have things like Russiagate or, basically influencing the election by outside entities, which can happen. It does happen, and there's a lot of bogus things going on that people get sucked into. So there's that period. Then there's right before and during the very first part of the election, scams that go on, misdirecting people where they're going to go, these sort of things that we see, bomb threats, people voting, where they're voting intimidation, saying, we're going to find out how you voted, you better vote the right way. Rewards being given away. Then there's the actual counting of the votes and machines involved in auditing. That's kind of what we're going to be talking about mostly today. And then finally, there's a reporting period. And they could just report the other person won. And just, make claims that they won. And then you have to disprove it. And that's sort of what happened in Venezuela recently, where the existing incumbent just claimed that he won the election and came up with completely bogus numbers. And so but they were able to recount it. So that's kind of it. Now, what we're going to be looking at here is mostly that counting and tabulation phase and the reporting phase and a little bit after it. But we did have these things. I want to go over some of these things here. What we want is, we really want some entity in the government that takes responsibility for making sure that at least we have transparency, that all records are preserved and made transparently available for independent verification by the public and campaigns and news organizations. So we really can't rely upon the government to do anything itself, because we know it's going to become corrupted. No matter what organization you set up that says we're going to be the watchdog for elections will be quickly corrupted by whoever just got elected. And it's going to be restaffed by them. And then all of a sudden it's something that only supports their point of view and that their current win. Now, number one, there's no question, you have to validate the election results through evidence like paper ballots and ballot images and cast vote records and voter rolls. In the year 2000, we had the Florida debacle where the punch cards had hanging chads and all this. And they were in the midst of recounting. Had they just gone on and recounted, I believe that Gore would have won. But they stopped it, and went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and they stopped the recounting. What we learned then, they did a weird thing. They went and they changed all the voting machines over to machines that were much worse. Machines that had no paper trail at all. I mean, the punch cards were bad, but they were at least a trail that you could go in and recount. What they replaced them with was fully electronic machines with just memory. And if the batteries went out, then you lost all the votes. If you wanted to change them, no one could tell. And so this was a really bad phase. And those are called DRE machines, or direct response, direct recording electronic machines. So direct recording. Then they decided to retrofit those with a thing called a VVPAT, or a voter verifiable paper audit trail, which is like a roll of paper that comes out on the side of the machine, where you can, if you take time, you can look and see how you voted and verify that theoretically how it went into the machine. And a lot of places required that those were all completely counted. Now, validating the election results through paper ballots, this takes time, and you can't do it right away. But we know that the totals in the central tabulator, the thing that adds everything up, and I'll show you this in a minute, they can be modified through back doors by just changing the results, just like they used to do with these direct recording electronic machines. And if you don't look at the evidence, you don't look at the paper trail, then what good is it to have? We know that we have to have this paper trail now, and this is critical, and they've since, they first went after what they called the Help America Vote Act in 2020. Well, it's actually a little bit after that, so it was a result of that 2020 election. That, I think it's 2003, something like that order. So that bill came out. And then all these machines were switched out very, very quickly, and they used whatever they had. And then later they realized, oops, we need a paper trail. Then they added the VVPAT on. And now they've gone over to a little bit more of a valid paper trail in terms of sheets of paper that you can look at, and that they look just like a ballot. Sometimes they're using QR codes and barcodes, which we don't like because people can't read those. And it's better to have a type of a ballot with the bubbles, even if it's machine marked, but at least you can read it. It's best if the person holds a pen and darkens that bubble themselves. That's the best thing. We know they verified it because they have to look there and they have to actually fill it in. And these are anonymous ballots. You really can't tell whose ballot it is, except in very, very rare cases. But if you fill them in right, you will get into the mix and no one will know which one is which. We'll see that in a second here, but there are some issues along those lines. So we have a thing which are paper ballots. These are required to be saved for 22 months by federal law. Retain, and they're put into storage. The problem is you can't get to them. So if you are a person who just ran for office or just a member of the public and you wanted to check the election, well, you say, well, I think the election wasn't very good, and they'll say, well, what is your theory, and what is your evidence of fraud? And you go, well, I don't have it yet because I need to look at the ballots first to see, what happened. And they go, well, too bad. You can't look at them unless you already have the evidence that there was fraud. So really, if you can't get to these ballots, they're really of no use. They're just saved kind of as a little bit of a bogus act where they say we're saving the paper, but the public doesn't get to look at it. Now, they may do their own internal audits and look at the paper and come out and say everything's fine. But those being an internal audit, I rarely find anything because these are the same staff that just did the election. What makes you think they're going to report out that they made a big mistake and everything is wrong? It's like asking, thinking that people are going to wave down a highway patrol officer and say, officer, I was speeding back there and I really need a ticket. Would you give me a ticket? They're not going to do it. So they want to have clean audits. They strive for clean. That means they change things as they go. In a sampling audit, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to report everything that happened, but they don't. So as a result, lately, we have these things called ballot images. And ballot images are complete, full picture of both sides of the paper ballot. And we might even look at a few here while we're talking. These ballot images are reasonably high quality. They're not really super high quality, but they're way higher than the old thing, which is just to detect those individual places on the ballot where a bubble might be. Very low resolution. It's only just a few places on the piece of paper. Now we're looking at probably 200 dots per inch. So it's much more than you're actually even looking at on a screen, which is usually 72 dots per inch or something on that order. It might be a lot more than that now, but that's what it used to be. But 200 dots per inch is pretty high resolution, but they're only black and white. So they lose color, and so you can't always see perfectly. But they're pretty good. They're pretty darn good. And then the cast vote records means that you have one record in a computer file, like say a spreadsheet, for the ballot number, the precinct, where, the style that it is, any other metadata that is involved in that ballot, and then the votes, what the person voted for. For that specific ballot, you can tell every single vote as evaluated by the voting system. That's a cast vote record. Voter rolls are who can vote, and of course we need to review that. Is there a big change where people voting and then all of a sudden they stop voting, a whole bunch of them? Maybe their ballots were lost. This is why we want to look at that. But of course you don't want to have people that are ineligible to voting. People have to be eligible, they have to be citizens, and they have to have a right to vote. Now, as I said, setting up an organization in the government that's going to review itself about elections is basically impossible to do. Everybody becomes corrupted that you try to do this. That's why we need this transparent access to the materials for public confidence, and we can then investigate anything that we want, but the public can only go so far, and especially we don't have enough time, and we'll see that in a minute, especially since they're delaying things so much in these days. Now, we've seen a few things in swing states that look fishy. Now, it's not enough. Our concerns are not sufficient to prompt court cases or claims of fraud. As I said, you have to have a lot of evidence to do that, to get past square one. Because you have people on the other side saying, no, there's no fraud here. And so we want this to stop. So it isn't a very good venue for actually getting to the truth. It isn't very good. So we're looking at the DOJ as having a long-standing role in safeguarding elections in terms of public trust. And so that's why we believe this is a good place to at least start the conversation. And we realize that there's more that we're going to have to discuss. Essentially, basically we realize that the most that they're going to be able to do is just to make sure that the election data is preserved, disclosed transparently, and also locked down with cryptographic mechanisms, which I'm not going to really get into here. It's something that we need to do, but is way beyond what I want to talk about. But it's something I fully understand and have been pushing forward. So, what are our concerns? Okay. Number one, we had election infrastructure theft during this last period. A number of machines were stolen in both in Georgia and Colorado, and there was concerns in Michigan. And so there is a problem with allowing this proprietary software to get out. And the reason is, if you have this software available for people, then they can design challenges to it and figure out how to get around security features. It turns out that the security features in the software are so bad that, the people that have analyzed it call it horrible. They found the same password used since 2010, and it was the default password used by the vendor. And in their analysis of the machines going out. So if you never change the password using the same one as the factory default, that's not a very good practice. So the machines that, well, the intrusion that I'm going to talk about here is in Mesa County, Colorado, and Tina Peters was the election official there. I don't really like how she went about this, nor how she handled herself in the process of review, but her technical team that she hired to review the software did come up with some very concerning results that we need to be aware of. So essentially we need to first talk about the election management system, or EMS. So the election management system is the central tabulator. It just runs on a regular computer, but it essentially keeps a database and gets all the data into the database and adds it up and makes the reports. That's all it is. What they found in this, in their review, and this most important thing, was that they had this backdoor, we're calling it, which is the addition of the Microsoft SQL Server Management Suite, or commonly called SSMS. This is a piece of software that can help people to manage and diagnose and look into issues regarding the database that they're using, which is this Microsoft SQL Server. And SQL means structured query language, but it just basically is a language that lets people talk to a database. Having this software on there allows unrestricted access to central tabulator data and permits modifications of the data without being tracked or logged by the EMS. Now, it would be optimal if if we had the ability to set up the software for running our elections such that it can restrict the type of actions that are possible by insiders. So we don't want to have to fully trust our insiders. We want to say, well, the insiders may, sure, we trust them, but they may be compromised. They may have been, blackmailed or something. And so they have to do it, or paid off, or there may be someone sneaking around that does it without them knowing. So it is, you'd like to say, well, we can trust our election officials, but we really should say we shouldn't have to trust our election officials. We should set up a system so that we don't rely upon trust. We say that system is so robust that they can't do anything wrong. It's just like so restrictive, and everything is logged. Any actions that they do, we can tell what it is. Unfortunately, this thing bypasses that, even if you had the idea of having it. And a lot of times they say, well, this is so robust that an election official can't do anything. They can't look at the results of any preliminary counts until well after the election, at least after Election Day. You don't want them doing, say, early vote counts or early vote by mail counting, which a lot of times they do start early. And we don't want them to have the results so they can report that out to their friends, like, gee, we're kind of behind here. We need to get our people voting. And that's not supposed to be allowed. Now, they do a lot of tracking of that based on the party affiliation of the party, the voters that come in, but you're not sure how they're going to vote exactly. You know pretty much that somebody registered Republican is probably going to vote for the Republican candidate, and same for Democrats, right? But, and so they just can look at how many people voted that way. But that doesn't give you the actual vote counts. And if it's close, the vote counts themselves are really important to know. And so they're not supposed to know that before election, the doors close on the polls. But they can just look at that if they have this, and they can add it up and see what it is. All right, so this is a backdoor. They can also make changes, just indiscriminate changes, add however many votes they want to the count. Now, if you did that, let's say you added 20,000 votes or 11,780 votes, whatever it may be, that you know that your person needs to now, because you can look at the data and see, well, how many do I need to win? I need 11,780, let's say, the amount that Trump needed in Georgia. Let's say that they don't want to go too close. They don't want to win by just one vote, right? So you wouldn't go 11,781. You would give it enough of a buffer so that you are going to be out of the automatic recount. You want to be up at least, say, a couple of percentage points over being equal. And so, this is why you figure you really need to know how far am I down, how much of a hack do I have to put in, because I don't want to overdo it because I could be easily caught then. I just need just a sweet spot of just enough to get past that recount area and then put in the fix, right? Well, guess what? With this software that they have here, you would be able to, number one, find out how many votes you're down, and number two, how many votes you want to change to put you up a certain amount to give you a win. Not just barely a win, but a win enough so you're not going to be recounted, not have any scrutiny, and you'll be able to say, it was a landslide. That's what you want if you're the hacker, right? So we had this team in Mesa County, Colorado, look at these vulnerabilities and say that this is a significant security risk. And obviously it is. You should not have this backdoor. And we understand that Dominion ships this with every EMS that they put out. Now, they noted that ensuring that the EMS computers cannot be connected to the internet is actually quite difficult, and I agree with this. How can you make sure that your computer is not connected wirelessly to some network or some communication channel? It's very, very hard. It used to be that you could just look at the cables and you'd say, oh, there's no cables connected, and therefore it can't communicate. And at that time, there were still some cables. There were some AC cables that were connected. And there was actually a way to send information over the power line that they could spy and communicate with these computers without people really realizing that they were connected. And today, every computer has a modem in it, and sometimes a cell modem. And you can communicate easily with that to a local Wi-Fi hotspot, or a connection point. And validating that these machines are not hooked up is not a trivial matter. And we're expecting election officials, some who they have really no experience or training in how wireless systems might work or how to make sure that they're, and so this is a severe problem. It means that such hacks could happen, okay? We could have people using wireless communication, and we could have them using the back door and changing the results in the system, right? So there's no question about this. Now we have the case in the Stephanie Lambert in Michigan, hearing slated for December 2nd. I don't know what the status is of that, but it should have been continued now, and we're past December 2nd, so we can look into that. But this is something that is actually pretty interesting, and maybe it's worth looking at that really quick. So here is the video And
continue in Antrim County in northern Michigan, where hearings have been held back and forth
hopefully you
regarding the
can
results
hear
of the
that.
2020 election. And from November 3rd on, the eyes of many in the
I don't
nation
see
were
the,
focused on voting irregularities in
it's
Antrim
not
County,
seemingly
Michigan.
to register
Now,
here.
Matt DePerno's legal team is revealing exclusively.
But I can explain what's going on here. This is, it says EMS admin on this computer. That's the election management system. You can see it just runs on a regular laptop. They may have a more, glamour system, and when they're working, but a lot of these laptops are very, highly functional, and they can easily handle most elections. This is a Dominion scanner voting machine, and these are the ballots here. So you would hand mark these ballots, or you could use a ballot marking device with a QR code and feed it into the same device. It scans both sides of these ballots, creates ballot images, puts that into memory, and creates the result. Now what they show here, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this analyst here, he shows how he feeds in the pages with, and this is a typical ballot with bubbles that you fill in, that you mark. And he feeds in a certain number of these, and he goes over the number of votes here. And essentially what he has set up is that these bubbles for Donald Trump and Joe Biden have been swapped. So the XY, these are detected according to the XY coordinates of these marks over here and the marks at the top. And if you just put into the system, the XY coordinates are different, and this is the Trump one and that's the Biden one, the machine is just going to blindly add these up as if they're the Trump ones and these are the Biden ones. And that's what he demonstrates in this. He puts the hack in, and then he shows in the tape coming out here when it's done that the votes are actually swapped. Okay, now this is not, and this picture right here actually is a good one to stop at, a little bit before that. Right. I guess I'm not quite at the top here, but what this is this is the back door, if you will, that SQL. Sir, at some point it goes up a little bit higher, and we can see that there. Okay, so you can see this is, maybe you can see this. It says Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. This is the software which is actually not supposed to be installed on any election system, because what it allows you to do is modify the tables on all the results without any tracking and without the logging it. Now you have to have a password to get in, but as I said, they hadn't changed the passwords for more than 10 years. Then later, this video also shows the actual EMS, which is where you would have the results of the candidates that would eventually come out. Now, in this EMS, you're not allowed to see these results until after Election Day. They're restricted. But if you had that back door in there, of course, you could see them whenever you want. And so there was a bit of concern, because we had people saying, oh, I know what the results are before they're even announced. Yeah, maybe they had something in here to be able to look at the database ahead of time. Okay, so that is a quick check there of what we're talking about. What is a backdoor, and how does it work a little bit. And so bottom line here is that this information about the backdoor was actually extracted from the voting system that's were out there by the Trump campaign and with people affiliated to it during that period since the 2020 election. Election experts agree such manipulation is possible. Now, regardless of whether you have this management system, which just makes it easier, it could be modified. And so that's why you need to have the paper, a paper record. Now, checking the ballot images will also detect this. And the case where we just saw where they flipped the, basically swapped votes one to the other, you wouldn't want to do that unless you know you were losing, because otherwise you would give away your win. But also just checking one ballot is enough to find it. So if you just checked one ballot, you would be able to see that it didn't match those results. So this is why you don't want to change all of them. You want to change, if you're the hacker, you say, well, I'm just going to change as many, just a few, just as many as least amount that I can in order to still get the result that I want. Now, we have, okay, so going on, we have the same thing discussed by a letter from renowned election security experts urging that Vice President Kamala Harris demand recounts in at least the states of Michigan, Nevada, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania due to the serious election security breaches. Okay, so this group of, and I know all these people and they're good people, they came to the same conclusion, all right? But they also are renowned people, so more than Ray Lutz, right? Which helps. And so it's good to read this over. Possessing copies of the voting system software enables bad actors to install it on electronic devices and to create their own working replicas of the voting system, to probe them and develop exploits, and then skilled adversaries can then also decompile the software to get a version of the source code and study it for vulnerabilities, and could even develop malware designed to be installed with minimal physical access to the voting system by unskilled accomplices to manipulate the vote counts. Attacks could also be launched by compromising the vendors responsible for programming the systems before election, enabling large-scale distribution of malware. And of course, it could also be distributed wirelessly, even to the extent of using something like Skynet, the distribution channel owned by Elon Musk. So that does take a special receiver and everything, so it would be pretty obvious if you were using that. But still, we're talking about just wireless access, and there's other ways to do it. You could just plug in an EEPROM, a thumb drive, and they have ways of taking over the system very, very quickly. And so how can you deal with this? You have to look at the evidence and check it. You're supposed to check it. We know this is necessary, and that's why we have that paper trail that's required by law to be kept for 22 months after the election. Federal law. But even though they keep the results, even though they keep the paper, no one can look at it. So I'm saying here, it must be emphasized that the combination of the back door, the difficult to disable wireless communication, and sophisticated actors. Do we have sophisticated actors? Elon Musk's pretty sophisticated. It's a mix that can yield difficult to spot election tampering. Therefore, no stone should remain unturned. So I agree with this group that asked Kamala Harris to demand recounts, and she should have done it. Unfortunately, there is a taboo amongst Democratic circles that they don't question anything. Everything is fine. And we're better than the Trump people because we're not conspiracy theorists, and we just go with whatever they say. And that's not a good plan. It doesn't square with reality. It doesn't square with reality at all. We already know that we have to look at some paper, we have to look at these images, we have to look at all the evidence, the cast vote records, to verify that it's correct. Now, pretty quickly, I want to go over this drop-off issue. And what we do is we compare the total votes cast in the presidential race to those in the first down ballot contest. Typically a U.S. Senate race, but if not, then it'll be a U.S. House race. Now, the down ballot contest needs to be what I call a partisan control type of contest. That means that the contest is more than just, do I like the guy or girl, or the person, the candidate. It's not just, do I like the candidate? It's, do I want to maintain control of this particular body, and whether I like the person or not, and I need to vote for them in order to control it because of my party affiliation. And so these seats rarely get to the point of like scrutinizing that person and saying, I don't like them, so I'm going to vote for the other party. It really doesn't happen very much. It does, but not too much. So there is this drop-off you can see in this chart that we took a look at very, very simply. I wanted to get a simple comparison. So in Nevada, the 2016 election, Hillary Clinton won. In 2020, Biden won. And in 2024, Trump won. Now these bars are the number of votes that the next contest down lost. So in other words, we have so many people voted for Kamala Harris in the presidential race, would be more, and this is the amount less, and then that Democratic candidate got fewer votes than the presidential candidate. And Republican candidate got fewer votes as well, but that Republican candidate also lost. So the Republican, so the Republican candidate is, if to say this is a Republican candidate, this is a Democratic candidate. The Republican candidate lost a little bit, so they're down. But the amount between the presidential candidate and the next contest down, you can see it was basically identical. It's exactly this. And actually, the Republicans had a little bit fewer lost. So they were a little bit more partisan, following. In other words, they tended to vote the top of the ticket for the president, and they would vote the next one down. And then we see this big change. This big change is where all of a sudden you have a huge drop-off to the Senate candidate on the Republican side. So you can either look at it as a whole bunch of additional votes for Trump that have materialized. You can say that they both should be about up here, and then a whole bunch of votes that were lost or discarded for Harris. Or you can say that the Republican candidate over here was ripped off and he should have had a lot more votes. And whereas the Democratic candidate, she had maybe too many votes. So that both of these, you can look at it either way. Okay, so it's in the position of the Democrats would look at this and say, wow, look at all the extra votes for Trump, and we got ripped off. Harris should have had more votes. Republicans look at it and say, oh, well, our Republican Senate candidate should have had a lot more votes, and that would have made this drop off less. And then that candidate would have won. Because this is the thing, is that if you have the presidential contest is one party, and why doesn't the same party Senate seat also win? And so it's an interesting question. That's why these split ticket areas are really good thing to actually look at. Now, there's been some talk about bullet ballots, and the actual story about bullet ballots is that we don't see the bullet ballots that have been claimed. And let me just show you a little picture here. So these are the actual ballots. First of all, what is a bullet ballot? Okay. Let's see here. Let me get this out of the way so I can still see kind of what I'm recording and whether you can see me. Okay. So in Clark County, which is where Las Vegas is in Nevada, and it's the biggest by far any of the counties. The other one is Washoe County, which is where Reno is, and also South Lake Tahoe, that area, and that's the second largest area in Nevada, and everything else has very low population. And when you have a vote for the president here, Democrats, you can see the Democrats, and this is sorted by the count, like the combination of things. So this is the president, U.S. Senate, U.S. House, the Nevada Senate, State Senate, and the Nevada State House, or the Assembly. And you can see there's a straight ticket here of everybody voting Democrat. That's straight ticket, right? So but they have to vote for each one of these. There isn't a one selection at the top that says vote all Democrats. And 218,184, so a lot. And then there's 188,000, so down about, what, 20, 30,000 here. And that's the straight Republican ticket, right? Now you have a little bit of mixtures where here, for some reason, the senator, the local Nevada Senate, was left blank a lot by both Republicans and Democrats. And so quite a ways down here, there's this one here, which is 7,203. Now, that's not a really huge number compared to 218,000. That's what they were calling a bullet ballot. A vote for the Republican and everything else blank. This one has a possibility of being a none of the above vote. But here it's just left blank all the way across. There's also a Democratic bullet ballot with fewer. So it's about 2,000 fewer of the Democratic bullet ballot. But there is not the many 20, 30, 50,000 or something that was proposed by the gentleman named Spoonamore. They're just not here. Now there's things that are nearly bullets. So this is a pure bullet where everything is blank. You also have things like, here's an interesting one. This is a Republican split ticket where there's a Republican voted for Trump, but everybody else is a Democrat. They really like Trump. That's quite a few, 3,608. You also have a little bit like a Republican bullet ballot, but it's where you vote for the Republican and you say no, none of the above to the senator, and the rest blank. Now, by the way, this doesn't include everything else on the ballot, which may have votes on them. We're just looking at these top seats, the ones that involve the partisan control. And then you have the Democratic nearly bullet, but none of the above here. Okay, 1,700 of those. This was the ranking originally. Just you can discard. You can just ignore this column. And then there's various other patterns. There's a Democratic split ticket where you vote just for Harris and everybody else are all Republicans. There were 1,300 of those. There was quite a few, 1,100, where you didn't vote for any president, but you voted for all the Democrats. Just didn't like Harris, right? And you also have the same for Republicans here. A Republican shell, you voted for all Republicans down, but you just didn't like Trump. So there's really a mix. There's some that are fully blank, 887 at least for these, and some that are nearly blank, but these two said, I'm not voting for any of these, but the rest blank. So, and now we're down into numbers where we're sub 1,000 of these types, and it goes on and on and on, right? So it goes on and on and on until you have just sometimes a single, and I didn't put them all in color here, but you have sometimes just one ballot of these types here. A lot of one ballot, like just one ballot of a type, because it's kind of miraculous that you just have one person vote a certain way. And that is something kind of interesting to look into. So all of this is interesting. But I just wanted to defeat the notion that there's a lot of bullet ballots. There isn't. There's a lot of scattered ballots that are different things. There's some shell ballots. There's a lot of mixture ballots. We're going to do some more analysis of this. But regardless of how you want to count these up, just looking at the Republican and this first contest down, the Senate. So did these match? Oops, I don't want to edit this. So were these the same? And you can see all the way down pretty far, they're all the same. And that's quite a few. We're getting down into 7,000 or less. And then all of a sudden, and these are the same. And this one was blank here. So they didn't vote for the senator, 7,000. Here's where the Democrats didn't, but that's only just a little bit less. And then those are the same, different, right? Opposites. That's what we're interested in. These opposites here, that's what causes the drop-off, right? Okay, so enough of this detail. We're going to be processing that data some more in order to make it more, draw out some of the interesting parts of it without having to look at every little line. So this drop-off is very, very interesting. And what happened here? Did the Democrat, because this was going up, steady increase of actual numbers of drop-offs, you would think it would be a straight line right about here. But we have these extra votes here. Now, were those because of RFK Jr.? We don't know. We know that sometimes in states that don't have RFK Jr. taken off of the ballot. Now, in Nevada, he was not on the ballot. So everybody who really loved RFK Jr. would say, oh, I have to vote for Trump now, and I will do it anyway. And so that could be those there, where in the other states they said they may not have been aware that he dropped out, and they would vote for him anyway. Usually the people who knew that he dropped out and, wanted to support Trump and RFK Jr. would have voted for Trump. So Nevada is interesting because it was Democratic win, and all of a sudden a Republican win. And we also have this mixed split ticket and a big drop-off. So we really want to look at it. We think it should be looked at. That's an issue. We have a lack of candidate challenges. Kamala Harris did not challenge the results. She should have. I mean, Democratic Party, please get on the ball. You have to be fighting. She says fight like hell and we win, but then she doesn't fight. So that's not good what happened there. Don't worry about being, the other side's always going to say that you're bad by whatever you do. Just neglect that. You got to do what's right. Our voting system today is designed to ensure integrity through thorough examinations of cast vote records, ballot images, and other electronic records, which serve as a safeguard against machine errors and manipulation. And also the paper. The problem is we can't get to the paper very easy. But if we want to get to the paper and recount it, I'm not against that. I just can't get to it. And I've tried. I've had lawsuits, and we've tried to get to the paper a number of times. It's just hard to do. And there's mistrust. Only 20 to 40% of voters are confident that the results are unaltered and good in every election. Now, I outlined in this letter, and I'm not going to go through them in detail, but there are historical precedents supporting that the DOJ provide more oversight to elections. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 put it in their hands to make sure that there was no discrimination, and it's the Civil Rights Department of this DOJ to do this. Foreign election interference occurred in 2016, and they investigated the Russian election interference. Who knows if it actually was Russian interference or not. It wasn't realized it didn't actually interfere in the actual counting of the votes. This was in the information warfare phase. And this Russian interference was just to manipulate the information and to give people the impression of Trump was better than Hillary, or Hillary was bad, or whatever. So that part of it really is not what I would consider election alter. It's not malicious actions to alter the results. It was just to try to convince people not to vote that way. We had many election investigations. The claims many of times were found to lack merit. And here's the problem with this. Even though I don't agree with a lot of the claims that they had, the problem is you have to have some kind of a claim, some sort of a fraud, idea of fraud, and you have to then state it as if it exists in order to get to the paper, in order to analyze anything. So you can't really fault them completely for wanting to get to analyze the paper and the election. And you can call them conspiracy theories, but it's what's required to get these things into court. And I think most of them were never allowed to get to any kind of adjudication of evidence. An evidentiary hearing largely was not conducted in these some 60 different cases. And it'd be interesting to see, well, how many cases, and I want to do this to actually review them and see, well, they say this was bogus, but should have they been able to actually just analyze get to the paper and look at it under watchful eye? We're not saying we want to let them alter anything. The DOJ had deployed federal monitors in polling places in election to ensure compliance with federal voting laws, so that's something that they've done before. They've collaborated for cybersecurity. They worked with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, to monitor the infrastructure. Now, CISA could be involved too, but they're kind of more an advisory role just for the cybersecurity aspects. Election Threats Task Force was established in 2021 to address systemic threats. Okay. So they have been doing it to some extent. And that's why we asked Merrick Garland to do this. We wanted them to pick up the ball and take a look at this election, because that's what they're supposed to do. It shouldn't be in the hands of the public 100%. It shouldn't be in the hands of whether or not Kamala Harris wants to contest the election and take it to court. It shouldn't necessarily be all in her hands. This is a big deal for all of us who wins this election. Okay, so we claim that these precedents underscore the DOJ's ability to act decisively in preserving the integrity of the electoral process. Will they? Well, we know Merrick Garland, he's not somebody who acts very quickly, that's for sure. Now, also, you have the HAVA, which is the Help America Vote Act, and it actually, in this law, which specifies, that's the law of HAVA, it said that that they would be at least reviewing and reporting. So that, and so then also they try to avoid election interference at DOJ. They try not to get involved in the election and bring things up at the wrong time, like right before the election. Why do they have this non-interference issue? It's because they actually have a role in making sure the elections are done right. So this exception that they have underscores the DOJ's responsibility for real-time adjudication of election-related issues, recognizing that some circumstances demand immediate intervention. And it's true. Time is of the essence in these elections. We don't have much time. And we can't, even though we have Audit Engine, which is a ballot image auditing platform that can be used by the public to audit contests in the election in counties, it's not enough. It's not enough. We need to have the powerhouse of the staff of the DOJ with government funding to be able to actually look at this and document for the public what the results were. So bottom line is we claim the DOJ has the responsibility, and we also realize that it's difficult for them to be independent. Yet audits and recounts typically conducted by the same offices responsible for the election, that's not a good way to do it either, is it? So we don't want the same office conducting its inspecting itself. That's what I said. It's like flagging down the officer and asking for a ticket. They're not going to generally, come up with any kind of issues. They'll cover them up. They may acknowledge them internally, but they're going to fix it so that it doesn't actually bubble up to the surface very much. Okay, so independent review mechanisms. What can we set up? It's a good thing to think about. How can you set up in the government a way for the government to check itself without it ever being corrupted? It's like impossible to do. Because, especially in this case, whoever just got elected is going to say, well, I'm fine, I deserved it. And anybody who says otherwise is just a conspiracy theorist, an election denier. And so therefore I'm legitimate and I should be in here. And so let's not dig around and try to look very far. So that's why we have a problem, because we can't. So I believe that what we're going to have to do is just transparency and public access to election data, all of this stuff should be possible without having to have a proven fraud theory that you can set down and say, here's the proof, fraud occurred, and therefore we want to get to the paper to prove it. You should be able to look at the paper or the images, the other things, and check it without necessarily having fraud. And maybe everything's fine, but you still need to check it. And that's why you have to check. You can't only check when you think that it's already failed, especially when you can't see anything until you check. Okay, well, also the DOJ can, according to HAVA, the DOJ was supposed to review election laws and recommend reforms. Well, hopefully they will help us out here and have reforms so we can have more transparency and not less. And so we'll have to see what happens if the Trump administration takes control of this. I understand they've already talked about the Civil Rights Department of the DOJ looking at elections in more detail to see if there's changes they want to make. And hopefully those changes will be sometimes, recent history The Republicans have been more interested in this. Democrats say, it's all election denial. If you say anything about it, then you are an automatic, basically it's almost like you have leprosy. You can't get anywhere. So it's taboo to say anything. The Republicans have, they're gaming the system, trying to get the laws set up so that they can have an advantage, and we know they do this. So do the Democrats. And so there's that level of before the election trying to game the system. And the point is that they're both doing that gaming before it, but we need basically we need the election laws to be providing that transparency. And I think it's about as far as you can go. What I was trying to say here in a second ago, before it flipped out of my mind, was that recently the Republicans have been trying to game the system, but some of their laws were pretty good. For example, in Georgia, they said all ballot images will become public. And so you can just ask for them and you get them. Now they're publishing them, not quite in the way we want, but we're making progress. So these places that are controlled by Republicans have more transparency than places like California, where they've said that ballot images are not public records and you cannot look at them. So it's kind of a strange thing here, where the Republicans, which you think would be for, according to the Democrats, trying to just game the system and they're just crazy, actually have some laws that have been good. We hope it goes that way some more. So the actions: investigate and prosecute the intimidation crimes, bomb threats, and so forth. Okay, we don't have to go into that too far because that's obvious. Investigate the infrastructure breaches and the stealing of the equipment. Why aren't they doing that already? I think that should be part of their program of reviewing that. Not just letting it go through the lower courts. They should have an understanding of what's going on. There should be a statistical and forensic review of voting patterns in swing states to identify and address any anomalies and put to rest any notion that these may be part of a scheme to steal the election, like the drop-offs. Okay. We know about the paper and electronic records, so this is kind of all combined here because we're talking about recounts in critical swing states. We don't have to do them all. We have to do just a few states and a few samples to validate these results. And I think the list should be a bit longer than what the other paper said. You can go in here and do a few. You don't have to go through exhaustively. You can hit a few key places, a few big counties in each one of these. And normally these states have just a few massive counties. Arizona has a massive Maricopa County, and then Pima County is number 2, and the rest of them very, very small. Georgia, Fulton County, DeKalb County, right in the middle of Atlanta, but it's spread out more. There's 159 counties in Georgia. Michigan, of course, you have the Detroit area, which Wayne County, and Nevada, is Clark County, which is so. My point is, it isn't all the counties, or you can just do a few counties and maybe just a few parts of those counties to see how it's done. An image of a ballot showing selections when compared to the cast vote record can detect many sources of errors, including EMS tabulation hacking using the back doors, and does not involve the overhead of handling paper. So we can do those without having to get into the paper and have somebody watch us as we look at the paper and tally it up. It's very hard to do. They did the tallying in Maricopa County completely. The county just hands off, gave it over to the cyber ninjas to do, It still took them months and months and months. It's a very big county, 2.1 million ballots. But it still took months and months to do a hand count. We should also reconcile the number of paper ballots with the number of voters who voted. And I didn't put it in here, but we should also look for anomalies. Like, did we have a big bunch of voters who voted consistently year after year, and suddenly they stopped? What happened? They're not going to know. You know, especially in the states where it's vote by mail, yeah, we accepted your ballot, but did it actually get included in the count? Kind of no way to tell, because your ballot becomes anonymous once it's pulled out of the envelope. This needs to be done, and it's a big shortage of oversight that we have to know if that ballot actually got included into the count. The drop-off rates I talked about, that can be analyzed. And then the DOJ should issue a detailed public report of the findings, of course. This should be done. Review compliance with retention of election data. The problem is, the law is, you have to retain ballot records, all records, for 22 months after the election. Of course, they just put them in a room, put shrink wrapper over them, and no one can touch them. So the retention doesn't really help, except for if we also can get to the ballot images. So they need to retain for 22 months, and some states still are deleting the data. It should include, when you say election records, it has to include digital and electronic records. It says they've already said that is. And it should also include ballot images, which they have somehow skipped. The DOJ should review the actions of jurisdictions and sanction those that continue to delete the original ballot images. Now, we don't want them changing the names either of these images. So some places have said, we're going to change the names, make it hard to use. Please don't do that. That's illegal, we feel, because that's deletion of data. But maybe there's a way to incentivize compliance, some kind of reward. Like if you do this, then you get some kind of special award. I don't know. Rather than saying we're going to sanction you. But at least they got to do something, because these laws are not being followed, and no one is enforcing them. Enhance data transparency, really important, because this is really, I think, as far as we can really trust them to go. Let's get the data to be transparent. Yeah, we want you to do your oversight, but you may not do any real oversight if your guy won. But let's make it transparent so we can do our own. So we want to ensure accessibility. We want to secure integrity. Want to protect the election data against tampering while maintaining authenticity and non-repudiation. So what that means is we know who made this, and they can't deny it. Non-repudiation means they can't. That isn't the one I put in. Yeah, we can prove that it was the one that you put in. That's really important. We need to improve the cryptographic security of ballot image data so that the machine that made it uses a private key to sign to digitally sign that image, such that we can tell that that machine and only that machine could have created that image. And then that can be cryptographic proof of where it came from. It's easily possible to do this. We just got to get them doing it. Now, I haven't seen a lot of images that have been, fooled with, but it could be done. So we want to secure them down for sure. Facilitate auditable oversight so that automated and independent audits, like ballot image audits, can be used. So that's what we're asking them to do. The American people deserve assurance that their votes were counted accurately and that no external or internal interference undermined the accurate tabulation of the choice for presidency, or any office, really, any office. But most important in the presidency, it's a really consequential election for president, way more than any other thing that we have. That is a letter to the Department of Justice. Now, I just want to say that I'm the executive director of Citizens Oversight Project, which is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. And I'm also an engineer, and I've done other things other than just pure software. Turns out I was involved in the nuclear shutdown of San Onofre, or the shutdown of the nuclear plant. So I know a lot about that. Not schooled in it, but I did a lot of on the boots on the ground kind of experience. And so I've been developing Audit Engine, which is a ballot image audit platform. So we're going to be able to use that if we can get the ballot images, and we're really seeking them. Status is right now we do have an audit nearly completed of Dane County, because we got those ballots right away, and they seem very clean so far. By clean, I mean that you have consistency in your names. You don't have a lot of extra goofy things that we have to account for in the data. It's just very, very clean, and a number here means a number there, and it's the same number, no translation tables or anything else needed. There's so many different ways it can pan out. Have we found things? Yeah, we actually have found things in our audits. You know, sometimes people say we need to do this audit or that audit. There's a lot of people who promote risk limiting audits, and risk limiting audits take a sample of the ballots, right, and try to extrapolate from that sample. And it's a valid way to do things, but it has limitations. If you have a really close election, you have to have a really, really large sample, and it ends up being just a full hand count. It can be very difficult in a large place to do that of paper. And instead, it'd be better to use a ballot image audit at that point, because it catches a lot of the things. It doesn't catch everything, but nothing catches everything. Nothing catches everything. We can look at some of the projects here in different places. We found a lot of things in Volusia County, but they had done a good result, even though they had to work around a lot of machine errors that they had there. Collier was a really clean election. Bartow County, they helped us out a lot, and they had very clean. They're a small county, only 50,000 people. Fulton County had a lot of issues in the 2020 election in terms of just missing ballot images. About 72% of the ballot images were missing, so we really couldn't do that sort of hardcore correlation type of audit. DeKalb County was interesting, and this is in the 2022 primary election, where they had the QR code on the ballots was misread, and so we looked into why that happened. And it was a misconfiguration issue, again, where essentially what happens is they say, oh, somebody dropped out. Okay, well, let's fix those places where they had candidates on the ballot and take that guy out, or take that, sometimes the whole contest out. The contest's not there anymore, or that person dropped out. Well, by the way this thing works, it's kind of like having a book and having an index at the end of the book. You can't just fix the chapter and say, I'm taking this term out, I'm not having it anymore, and adding a term or adding a listing to the index, adding a page. Let's say you add a whole page to that chapter. So that chapter, all the index entries are going to be changed, but also all the rest of the chapters are going to get changed too. All their page numbers need to change. If you only change the page numbers for the current chapter, you're going to have a problem. That's what happened with that QR code situation. Dane County is one of the first counties to publish their ballot images, and so They've done a pretty good job, but they have a little bit of weird nuances in past elections. I think hopefully they've been sort of cleaning that up, and so far it looks pretty good. In Monmouth County, we found that there were 977 repeated ballot images, which we detected because they were exact duplicates in the data. And that was because of 7 thumb drives that were loaded twice into the EMS, the election management systems. They load them in, and these election management systems are so stupid. They don't know that the thing has been read in before, and they go, oh, there's another thumb drive, and it adds new numbers for the same ballots. So they had another nearly 1,000 repeated ballots that were added in accidentally. And what that resulted was in that they had to hand count contests directly affected by the repeated ballots. And we could take those ballots out of the mix as we could identify them because they were exact duplicates of the other images, right? Because they had just read them in, they're identical copies. So they're easy for an image processing like a computer to identify those as exact duplicates. And when we did that, you can't do that by hand, right? You can't find, they're not in there. The ballots really aren't there. The paper isn't there. What they did was they had the scans of the paper loaded in twice, 7 thumb drives twice. So the paper really wasn't there. So when you go back to the paper, you would get the right result. And we were within just a few votes of the hand count, validating our results. But we actually think we probably got it more right than they did. It's hard to do hand counts, and we're able to look at the ballots very, very carefully. So, and this is not a question about are the ballots correct, are the images correct? They're not going to, no one's going to alter these images. In this case, this is just because of the machine error. We did actually find there was a few more places where there were 3 other contests that also had configuration errors. But turns out one of them was recounted, and they didn't tell us about that one. So it was the Long Branch Board of Education contest was hand counted by the election staff, and it wasn't disclosed on their website, but we found out that they did that because they changed the results from what they would have been with those in there. And the other 2 contests that we detected with this were not competitive contests. It was like vote for 3 and there was only 2 candidates, so both of them won, that kind of thing. So and then in Mercer County, both in Mercer and this is New Jersey, so in 2020 they just had converted their election machines from pure DREs with no tracking whatsoever over to machines that had a paper record. And there was a little bit of confusion or wrinkles that happen when you adopt a new voting system. That's mostly what this is. But still, Mercer County had some serious problems there, and we were still missing some images that we could not compare, but it seemed like they still had the numbers correct, and a couple of the contests were incorrect. And that was 344,000 contests. So very, very low. High overall agreement of 99.74%, even though we did not have all of the ballots. And we did a formal pilot audit with the state of Maryland, in Somerset, and in Rockville City. This was in real time. And one thing I want to point out, we were the first, I want to make sure the public knows this, to do OCR checking of BMD ballots. So the BMD ballots have the barcode at the top, and they have then lists below what you voted for that you're supposed to check. A lot of people don't check it, which is a problem. But we were reading that part and not the QR code. So we don't rely upon the QR code to do our processing. And we were really the first to demonstrate that, even though we did not do it statewide. So that is a little bit of our history, and we're going to be adding more to this as we're able to use this platform in more detail. Our status right now is we have announced that we are going to be doing some audits of this election ourselves, because the Department of Justice isn't responding, and we need to do it as the public. And so we have, let me just pause this. Okay, so I just wanted to show you this really quick, which is our press release to conduct independent ballot image audits of the 2024 election to focus on split ticket swing states where Trump won or Kamala Harris lost, while down ballot Republicans lost, or conversely, where Democrats won. So it's an interesting case where, like, if you're in the shoes of Kamala Harris and you're saying, oh man, I lost. And look at this, like in Nevada. The Democratic senator won, got enough votes, and that's a competitive race. And how is it that we know the Republican was a competitive race too? Why did I lose? And the other way of looking at it is where, for example, in Arizona, Carrie Lake is saying, oh, I should have won this. And so she's interested in maybe looking at it as well. So by looking at split ticket swing states, we really could look at some of the most interesting things that we can with a little bit of time, effort that we have available. So the effort is grounded in well-documented concerns about vulnerabilities in election systems, okay, which I already went over. We also had this case called DeKalb, and they pronounce it DeKalb, not DeKalb. DeKalb GOP versus Raffensperger, where the computer security agent Clay Parikh, very good guy. I think he actually knows a lot of what he's doing. I don't find any issues with his claims. He's not going overboard or anything. But basically he's right. The voting system security was horrible. They were using passwords for more than 10 years. So we're looking at maybe, definitely we want to go in Nevada. We already started Wisconsin and Dane County, but we're going to be, as soon as we can get ballot images available, and I hope that the states will help us out here. You know, don't resist. Let us get the ballot images. Let us take a look at it. If you've done a good job, you've got nothing to fear. Let's take a look at what's going on. Don't withhold it. So by focusing on areas with split ticket outcomes, we aim to analyze patterns and provide clarity on whether the voters' choices were effectively reflected. Okay, so that's what we're working on. This is our current initiative. You've seen the letter to Merrick Garland. We also have a letter that we sent previously, which has a little bit larger scope, to Biden and Merrick Garland prior to the election itself. But it includes things that Biden could do in his last few days of office, but also we wanted to actually kind of structure everything together in a package so we knew what we were working toward. Completely nonpartisan issue. This is about making sure that our elections work right. This is about checking the results. And let me reassure you, we have people in our group who are way to the right, way to the left, down the middle, everything. We don't talk about who should win. We talk about what happened. We're not talking about conspiracy theories. We're talking about theories of what happened. You can join us if you'd like. Again, it's citizensoversight.org, at auditingine.org. My name is Ray Lutz. Thank you.